Hey everyone, Alyssa Hope here. I have not posted on this channel for a really long time, and I thought I would try to change that. I'm always reading, and one thing about me is that I'm a very curious person, and I love to consume information from different genres when it comes to books. One that I've read in recent years that I've read again from the scientific realm is that of Anna Lembke's. She is someone who studied addiction most of her life and has actually got a lot of practice in the field of helping those recover from addiction, and I'm referring to psychiatry. But she's actually written a book that's not only gone into the neuroscience of it, but it's also really just given us a perspective from her about herself and other patients on how different forms of addictions can really plague people and why. And for me, I think this book has taught me so much about the brain and why we get so addicted to things. I'm gonna read and go through some of the top things that have stuck out to me personally. So one of the biggest risk factors for getting addicted is easy access. We think about other countries where, studies show that they're more happier because they don't have this overabundance of things that we have in our society, like food, drink, and just anything you can think of entertainment-wise is at your fingertips. So what happens whenever all those basic needs, you think of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, all those basic needs are taken care of, the food, the shelter, the air, all of those things. We don't have to concentrate on them anymore, right? So our brains need something to ruminate about. So we're like, oh man, problem. And we tend to think more internally and not externally about our problems. Oh, they don't like me or this or that. So what do we do to cope? Well, we reach out to get something to make us feel better, right? The substances or the behaviors. And one of those people, or I guess you should say people that are at risk for addiction, for reaching out for those different substances or having those behaviors are people that are poor and uneducated. Well, why? When you think about someone who is poor and uneducated, they probably don't have the education. They probably don't have the wherewithal on what a specific drug or a behavior is going to do to them. And they're kind of just thinking with the hedonistic monkey brain and not really the well-developed frontal lobe or prefrontal cortex, if you will. They're just kind of going. They just want something to fill that void. There's a study, actually, and I'll link that below, that I heard about on a podcast a while back where there were gorillas studied, and for whatever reason, they gave gorillas cocaine. Okay. The gorillas at the bottom of the hierarchy, so not the alpha, but the bottom, they were the ones who consumed the cocaine. Well, why? Well, because they don't have that status at the top. They don't have all of the resources to keep them at baseline or above baseline, which we'll get to. So they have to reach for something to get them there. So we think about trauma. We think about things that happen to people, and they just seem like they're naturally unhappy, right? Our brain has a baseline, and Anna really dives deep into this in her book of where we are as far as our happiness. So our brain craves homeostasis. Our brain naturally loves to just be in the middle, and our brain will work to get there. So whether that means that we, are down here and we need to work to get up here, or that may mean that we're up here and we need to work down to get here. So an example, hangover. You go out, have some drinks, the next morning you feel like utter shit, right? Why? Well, because you're trying to get back, your brain is, to where you were. You had that pleasure, you had that high. So basically you have to pay for it to go back down to get here. So it's all, it makes sense, right? It's logic when you think about it. So you're equaling out the scales, if you will. And these people, because they're already set back, because they've already had something happen, they feel like they have to reach out for something else to get them to baseline. And Anna goes into the neuroadaptation of things. So basically, whenever you continuously use a substance, there will be that neuroadaptation that happens in your brain to where you're building a tolerance for that drug or that behavior that is getting you the dopamine. Hence, dopamine nation is that chemical that we naturally produce in our brain. It's very natural. We need it for survival. If you don't have dopamine, you're SOL. Like, you're going to have no motivation in your life to do anything, to seek out anything. So it's very important to have dopamine in general. So everyone has learned of the pleasure-pain balance up to this point in the book. Dopamine is released in anticipation of a reward. And dopamine is the main component with the pleasure-pain balance. With that being said, I really like one of Anna's quotes in here. She says, "Human beings have responded too well to the challenge of pursuing pleasure and avoiding pain. We've transformed the world from a place of scarcity to overabundance." So, like I said, going back to the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, what have we done? We found all of our resources, right? We've solved the challenge of food. We've solved the challenge of water, well, in most areas of the world. And we've solved the challenge of shelter. So what other challenges are there, right? And so now we have all this overabundance, and I think we're struggling to come to grips with it. We think about how our brains have not really caught up. We're still catching up from a neuro standpoint in our brains to where we can't handle things such as cell phones, gambling, certain things that give us that pleasure. And we think about things so simple as, when you find something in the wild, you find something that shows your tribe that you're worthy, or you do something that shows your tribe that you're worthy, you get that shot of dopamine. Small things like that. You kill an animal, you bring it back, and certain things. You have your family, spending time with your family, and those things, are very simple, very intricate. But now we think about it, and it's like we have all these traps to fall into. So one of the things that she really hits hard on is self-binding. In order to help ourselves, we can do these self-binding rituals to stop ourselves from, being on our phone way too much throughout the day, or overeating, or drinking too much, or what have you. So, it may be where you don't want to keep alcohol in the home. You're self-binding. You're saying, okay, I know the substance gives me pleasure, but I'm going to keep it away because the temptation is too hard. My brain is just not able. I don't have the capacity to say no to that. So I feel like I have to bind myself here and not have it to even look at. So self-binding is acknowledging the vulnerability to the compulsion to use. Definition: creating tangible barriers between us and the addiction. So here's something interesting. And one of the things that she talks about in her book is the crazy amount of people who get a gastric bypass and develop an addiction with alcohol. So here's the thing. Overeating, obviously, you have an issue with eating, okay? So it's the behavior. The behavior is comforting you. You're always putting something in your mouth. You're eating. Something stresses me out. Oh, I'm gonna eat. I'm gonna reach for the food, okay? So the food is what soothes, because you're not able to soothe yourself. So what do? You reach for the food. You can't emotionally regulate on your own. The food is the source of that. That is the behavior. So if you take that ability to use food as the coping strategy and you make the stomach smaller, then that person can't survive basically emotionally anymore. They're like, oh shit, what can I do now, right? So the behavior is still there. The inability to regulate on one's own is still there. So go for the drink. Alcohol. 1 in 4 gastric bypass recipients develops a problem with alcohol. Most people who have surgery, as far as gastric bypass is concerned, have food addiction. Few people who have surgery get the behavioral and psychological interventions they need to change their eating habits. So just think about like the lack of self-awareness that most people have. And this is not a criticism. This is just an observation. And like, obviously, there's a lot of empathy there, I think. But just think about the lack of self-awareness. Going in, you're like, oh, I hate the fact that I have all this stored energy on me. I need to fix it. What do? I get a gastric bypass. Okay. But at the same time, not keeping in mind, okay, why am I struggling with this weight? Why am I struggling with eating? And these people, they aren't thinking about it. So they're going again for the pleasure. They're going again for the dopamine and the alcohol. And this was one that really floored me. Like I told people about it when it would come up in conversation, because it was mind-boggling to me. The surgery alters how alcohol is metabolized, increasing rate of absorption. So basically it means that it gets you drunk faster. Patients get intoxicated faster, stay intoxicated longer. So really, it really sucks, because you think about it and you're like, well, this person's trying to come out of one addiction, and then because of this, they're more likely to get addicted to alcohol. So here's one more thing that I found very interesting from her book, is the fact that the pain side of the balance can be pushed on, as I alluded to earlier, to get pleasure. So if you're going from you're already at baseline, okay? And you go down from baseline down, you feel some pain, then you go up. And one way to do that, which I do it every day, is exercise. But something interesting that Anna reports here is that exercise predicts lower levels of drug use. So you think about, instead of going directly to pleasure, you're going directly to pain. You're saying, give me that pain. And that's me. I'm always, I think, looking for a challenge mentally, in relationships, and just in general in life, in my career, in my fitness pursuits. And so I find myself always kind of just going towards that side of it more so than the pleasure side. But for some people, it's just their innate responses to go to that pleasure side. They want the path of least resistance. But to sum up all of this up, because I think I did not go through the notes for every single chapter, but to sum everything up, I think Anna, most importantly, gives examples from her own life. To hear someone who is so highly educated and so proficient in addiction just admit that she had an addiction to vampire romance novels. I think for me as a reader, that made me want to engage with the book even more. I'm like, well, this is genuine. This isn't just clinical psychiatry. This is being genuine. And so coming from her, and also different accounts from different patients, talking about, she recanted a patient that had a proficient sexual sex addiction for years. Recalled someone who had an issue with shopping. So she's getting into those behavioral addictions as well, not just the substances. So I think if you're wanting an understanding of the neuroscience behind addiction, but also just understanding it from a level of being human. I mean, because obviously, like, she puts herself in there too and humanizes it and gives you a really good understanding of the human predicament, and one that most people face today in one way or another. So if you enjoy a good read, a little science, something interesting, and something that's going to educate you, definitely pick up this book. I myself found it on Audible. Anna actually reads it herself, so I think it's really cool when you can hear someone talk about their life in their own voice. There's something special about it, and you feel more, I think, in my opinion, more of an emotional connection with that person and the way they're sharing their tone of voice. But yeah, hopefully I'll be able to do more book reviews here on Alyssa Hope Reads. I'm looking forward to telling you all more of my thoughts on various books. So if you haven't subscribed yet, please think about subscribing, and I'll see y'all next time.